afternoon, Generation W. We are back. And as you can tell, we're happy to be here with you. This is what? Our time to connect, to be inspired, to learn something new. And you know what? Just to feel a bit better about ourselves and this time we spend together. There's great power in connectivity and community, right? Especially on a day like today, 9/11. It's a somber day. I happened to put on the TV this morning just prior to the ringing of the bell in New York City at 8:46. The time the first plane hit the first tower of the World Trade Center. I think so many of us of a certain age will forever remember where you were at that time, how you found out about what was going on, and ultimately the unfolding of the news and the revelation that our country had been attacked by terrorists. Nearly 3,000 people were killed, and our lives, all of us as a country, we were transformed. I have to say, it is a day of reflection, of memories relived, and it has been 23 years since that fateful day. I do hope that we continue to maintain the vigilance and the power of remembering, honoring those who sacrificed, while we use the lessons of history to help us inform us moving forward with grace and, of course, grit. I found this thought from Deepak Chopra that I thought I would share. It was resonant for me. As he said, September 11th is a personal remembrance. It was a reminder that life is fleeting, it's impermanent and uncertain. Therefore, we must make use of every moment and nurture it with affection, tenderness, beauty, creativity, and laughter. There's a lot to be said for that, right? And it was interesting, as I was doing my research for this, Sherry and I always spend time searching how we would want to remember 9/11 today with all of you, as it was our first day back. So there's this joy, but there's this counterweight. I realized that I was looking for a way to find a positive in a very dark time. I was looking a way for us to see what's ahead of us, from lessons behind us, and to impress upon myself, and then, of course, to share with you the hope, the opportunity, the possibilities I always feel. Deepak Chopra has a way of doing that, not only for me, but for all of us. And then I said, why did I choose this as opposed to others? I mean, do you ever ask yourself why you make the choices that you do? The language you choose, right? The way you choose to express yourself? How often are we intentional about those choices, as opposed to, well, and I say this often, right? I liked it, it felt good, seemed right. And by the way, they're all justifiable reasons, right? But today we talk about brand, developing and building a personal as well as a professional brand. Okay. Lindrea Reynolds will help us understand the impact of the choices we make and how we can be proactive in shaping how we would like to be seen and heard. And judging by the feedback we've gotten, it seems like a lot of you have great interest in that. Lindrea is a creative enthusiast who is obsessed with brand development and personal growth, with a deep passion for reimagining storytelling experiences and advocating for social good. And we know we all love that. She helps businesses and individuals inspire positive change. Yes, right? Gain visibility and create lasting connections. You are a Generation W woman. Her agency is LR Brand Consulting. She's out of Chicago, where she is with us today. Its mission to empower dream chasers and to activate their undiscovered superpowers and positively impact society. Lynn, I am so glad you're with us today. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me, Donna. I'm so excited.
It's all great. And I'm just saying hello to everybody because it's just great to see everybody. We did take the summer off. We did a lot of strategy thinking and building for Generation W. So to be back here all connected, coming off an incredible experience for me yesterday, I was able to openly do the opening keynote for an organization called Women in Chemicals. It was their first ever event, bringing in women from across the chemical industry. Again, just so I still think I have that adrenaline from the power of bringing people together to talk about things that matter to us in a way that we feel good about. So you're our perfect welcome back guest. Tell us a little bit about how you got to where you are in the work you're doing.
Yeah, awesome. Well, first of all, Donna, I love that you used the word intentional
Oh,
earlier
good. I'm
because
glad.
a lot of my journey has been intentional, but also a faith walk. And I would say, just going back, I think about my own personal brand origin story, and
Yes. Would you
I
share that?
I
Yes.
am. I'm yelling, yeah. So I was born, of course, in Chicago, and I have two amazing parents. And I think that's why legacy building is so important to me because I have parents who they didn't go to college. They aren't entrepreneurs. Our stories couldn't be more different. But they are so influential and they saw my value below the surface. They worked very hard to make sure that I had access. Both my brother and I had access to resources and opportunities that they did not have access to. And so I attended high school, and I remember one of the best high schools here in Chicago, and that my mom and dad fought for it to get me there. And I remember I had an art teacher, and I told him, I want to do something that merged art and computers. And so he said, you should study graphic design. And so he wrote a recommendation for me to be in this AP graphic design program. And so I would say that was my first introduction into creative storytelling. And so I ended up studying graphic design, and I also played basketball in high school. And so, yes, I was a number two, I was a shooting guard. And yes, I had to give up basketball in order to, yeah, I couldn't do the after school program and play ball. And so I had to make a choice to just kind of continue to hone my craft. I knew I wasn't going pro, but I loved it, and I enjoyed it. And it was a hard transition, but I had to make a decision. And so I ended up studying graphic design in high school and then in college. And that's what I actually got my degree in. Once I graduated and started working professionally, I had a lot of people telling me, make this look pretty, make this look pretty. And it was frustrating to me because I've never seen the work that I do or the things that I care about as just making it look pretty. I care so much about the inside out. Why does it need to look like this? Who are we talking to? How do we want to transform lives with this? But the people I was working with, they didn't quite see that value in what I was doing. So I started to study marketing and brand storytelling and brand development on an organizational side. So fast forward to me working within a nonprofit and working as a director of marketing. I found myself telling these incredible stories about young people and their lives and why youth development is so important and why the work is needed in order to make sure that they can transition into the careers or trajectories that they're designed to go into. In the midst of doing that storytelling work, I would have these incredible coworkers who would see me sit on different committees or volunteer to participate in certain opportunities that I wasn't asked to volunteer, wasn't invited to technically. I invited myself. I would ask. So I would have coworkers actually come have conversations with me and ask, hey, what should I say to get on this committee? How do I position myself to be seen within my team? What should I say to my supervisor? Excuse me, my supervisor. So I found myself kind of coaching my coworkers while also doing my work, which really made me intrigued with personal branding and personal brand storytelling because I was already doing it for myself. I was already advocating. I had been promoted twice. I had started a podcast. I was doing several things within the organization and outside of the organization, but I was also helping my coworkers. And so I kind of fell in love with this whole idea of not just brand storytelling from the inside out from an organizational standpoint, but also from a personal standpoint so that you can gain the opportunities and you can walk in your desired path. And so from there, I left the organization and I launched my consultancy. And even being within that organization, going back, I saw how my work has so much impact with some of the connections that they were making. And so I launched my consultancy. We've been able to work with Google and a lot of large brands and a lot of incredible people, from executives to nonprofit founders to just interns who want to know how they can thrive within the organization and be their best selves. So that's a little bit of my story.
Well, that's a good story. And it's interesting. Yesterday I spoke to, as I said, like 300 some plus women, and I talked about patterns, and I asked them, do you realize that we're all pattern weavers? Meaning that there's patterns in our life we may not see. And I wrote down two things immediately when you started talking. And the first one was that your parents saw the value below the surface in you. And then as you pursued your work, you said you cared about the inside out. In a sense, echoing what your parents saw in you, right? In what you saw as value in the work, which now has become, right, the developer of brands. So tell us about this inside out brand approach that you have. And tell us, first of all, why should we even care about a personal or professional brand?
We should care because it's our perception of how we show up in the world. A lot of people focus on its reputation building. Yes, it can be that. But in terms of how you want to be seen in the world and how you want to have impact in this world, in this society, it's important that we think about how we show up and what that looks like. And when I say the inside out, I always say how we take care of ourselves, it influences how we show up. Who we're connected to, it influences how we show up and how we behave. Going back to my parents, just kind of seeing my value below the surface and my brother's value below the surface, they've always paid attention to some of the small things I would do. If you ask my mom today, she would say, she tells this story about me coming home from kindergarten, from preschool, and I'm saying, I want to learn how to read. I need to learn how to read because I felt like I was behind. She said, you always wanted to be ahead. You always wanted to do something that you had to, it may not have been that time or you hadn't gotten there yet, but you always wanted to do this thing. So seeing the inside out is paying attention to some of those things that may not be as prevalent. And so I think you have to kind of go back to your origin story and kind of identify where you've had impact, where someone has never even called it out, where you've seen that you've changed someone's life. And so I think that inside out approach is how you feel about yourself, how you personally see yourself, and then you can really be truthful and honest of how you want others to see you.
So take us through your process. You have a next level brand behavior, right? Tell us how we approach, you can use me as your guinea pig, or if anybody else wants to raise your hand. We come to you and we say, we really want help with our brand. We want people to see us for who we are and the value we can bring. What should we start? What's our first step?
Yeah. I know I kind of feel redundant. I always say going back to your origin story. I always say going back to who you are and kind of walking through your beginnings. There's a process I call the peer. It's your personality, it's your expertise, that thing that you're really, really good at, and it's your experiences. I think oftentimes we equate our value to our experience. We'll go down our resume, but what are your experiences? If you've done things even outside of the workplace, where you've built community, where you've volunteered in different places, where you've even impacted the lives of your own children at home, these are your experiences that hone who you are and how you show up in the world. And so thinking about your experiences and also thinking about your why. Why have you made the decisions over time to join an organization or to be a part of a specific group or to join a board, or to invite someone into your space who where you feel psychologically safe, but you may feel a little bit uncomfortable because you're not even sure if you share the same values. So kind of thinking about your why, and thinking about your, as I call it, a peer, and going through your origin stories and identifying that. I think once you go through that, you start to kind of put the pieces together to understand what your superpower is. I always say that for me, even with the value below the surface, my parents saw that in me and I saw it in other people. It was something that I cared about from the time I was a child. I would even, if someone was running for office, I wanted to actually design their posters and write about who they were because I wanted to support them on their journey. If it was somebody walking, one of my first best friends, she was standing alone and I came up to her and I started talking to her and she was standing by herself. And so I wanted her to be seen as value and be seen. And so that has always been something that was in me. It was always something that was in me. So all of us have something, this innate ability or attribute that is God-given, that we have to sometimes just write it out and talk about it so that we can get it out of our systems and identify the places and the people that we need to connect with. And I think once you do that work, you can identify, okay, now my mission. What's my actual mission? You know.
Okay, I get it. I get it. So it sounds like we're doing that work all together now. And I just want to actually mention Joy Kurtz's really sweet and thoughtful remarks. She's fortunate to have a husband who saw her abilities and always pushed her to go further. He saw this in our children too and was a huge force in all of their development. And I know that he sadly passed. Joy is, I think, in a way, we talked about remembering heroes today, is also bringing the fact that people in our lives very close to us can move us forward, right?
Absolutely. Thank you for sharing, Joy. Thank you so much. I always call people like Joy's husband and other loved ones in our lives or friends, I call them our influencers and our insulators. You know, those are the people who push us forward and say, don't be afraid to chase this opportunity. Turn that insecurity that you have into an opportunity. The influencers, I remember growing up, my smile was an insecurity for me. And I was supposed to get braces when I was 16. I had a basketball game and I told my mom I didn't want to get my braces that day because I had a game. My mom was like, if you don't get your braces today, you're going to have to get them as an adult. She did not lie. And so I had always been insecure about my teeth. I even had a teacher in first grade who said something about my teeth. And I think that kind of ignited that insecurity. But later on in life, I had a client who told me it was my smile that intrigued her, that brought her to me. And so I learned that my smile is actually my superpower. The one thing I was insecure about is the one thing that many people actually remember about me and makes them feel safe and comfortable and welcome. And so when you have people in your lives who can, even the things that you may feel insecure about and unsure about, and they can let you know that, use that to your power. Those are your influencers and your insulators, which I love that Joy brought up her husband, because I'm sure he was this person as well. Those are the people who protect us. Those are the people who help preserve us, to say, you're in a different season right now. It's okay to take a step back. It's okay to breathe. It's okay to take a vacation, protect yourself, preserve yourself. Maybe this isn't the season to go out, because I know what's personally going on in your life. And so for many of us, we have people who share both of those roles. And for some of us, we have people who are either one or the other. So I often say, have insulators and influencers in your life who can help you move forward, or also put up those force fields to say,
Right. And I'm going to recognize a person who I just saw pop up on our chat stream here, Dr. Orender Johnson, who also happens to be the chairman of our Generation W board, but an extraordinary woman. And she's, of course, she'd say this is forcing her to reflect. She's so reflective. She's an influencer for me, and I think also an insulator. So it's in the people around us. So thank you, Orender, for being with us. And I want to remind, if you're new to Generation W to Refresh, this is a communal experience. Please don't be shy. share your comments, ask questions. We'll forward them along. I would really like us now to kind of focus on the development of the brand experience. You started out, I guess, with a lot of self-reflection. I guess you might sit with people. We have to ask ourselves what our questions are, I guess, in order to figure out who we want to be on the outside to people. Who do we want to reflect from the inside? Okay. Take us on that next step of that journey.
Yeah, next step of that journey. And I would also say, even with that journey, the goal setting, identifying your personal and professional goals. Because again, that influences the decisions that we make. When personal branding is all about decision making. And so what are your personal goals? I've had a client who said, my professional goal is to ensure that I'm actually launching this accounting firm or growing this accounting firm. But a personal goal of mine is to work out more. And so being clear and honest about where you are personally and professionally is really important when we're talking about personal branding, because again, we can also get comparison syndrome, and we can see people out there doing incredible things, taking on several opportunities without realizing where we are and what our goals are personally and professionally. So really identifying your personal and professional goals so you can be truthful with this next step. You know, now that you've identified, this is my superpower, this is how I want to show up in the world. So that is a step. Once you've done that, the work that we do with clients is we always ask them their big, audacious, noble goal. And we do that because I'm a firm believer that we are not created to just do a job or a task. We're put in spaces to make greater impact in the world. And so I always ask clients, what is your big, audacious, noble goal? Even if you feel like you're not going to achieve it by yourself, what do you want to see changed in the world? Is it to make sure that there's equity in sports between men and women? You know, is that your big, audacious, noble goal? Is it to ensure that we eliminate poverty in under-resourced communities? You know, and so identifying what's that foundational, audacious, noble goal of yours, so that it keeps you grounded, you know, so that you can kind of build from there and connect where you feel like so you can make intentional connections from there. Personally, my big, audacious, noble goal is to illuminate the world with good. I have it right behind me, and I keep it. It's written there, and it stems from Matthew 5:16. Let your light so shine so that men may see your good works and glorify the Father in heaven. And so that's my foundation for the work that I do, and it's what keeps me grounded. So I ask clients, what is your big, audacious, noble goal, so you can stay grounded in this work? And so that is a step. The next step is, from that, we identify your values and we identify what matters most to you. We all have different values. Is it legacy building? Is it being a good steward of community? Is it family and well-being?
Let me ask you a question though. Like, you can't be all of them above. And before you answer that, I do want to just to also say hello to Tiffany Wilding White, a former refresher. I guess that's what we should call you all now. You're all now Team Refresh. You are a refresher. Like Dr. Johnson, Olenda's been on a couple of times. She had that great phrase, Tiffany, when she said, oh, I love this one. Ink it, don't just think it. That's a good one. Ink it, don't just think it. But I guess my question to you is, can't you want to do all of those things? Do you have to, I mean, if we're talking about professional brand, we're talking about personal brand.
Yeah, I merged the two because who you are is going to show up where you work. So you can't. The problem with a lot of people is that we oftentimes you'll hear code switching as it pertains to race. People code switch every day. They'll be a total different person at home, and then they have this anxiety, and then they're coming to work, and then they're trying to switch up and be somebody else. And so you can't have a professional. I merged the two because who you are is going to show up regardless of where you are. I always say, how do we just make sure we elevate the good stuff. No one is perfect. Some conversations that we have should be left with maybe our best friends or our spouses. But at the end of the day, your personal brand is who you are and how you're going to show up no matter what space you're in, work or at home. And so I merged the two. I don't think you can just have this this personal brand and then separate it and be this professional brand.
No, I do think that that authenticity does come through. I agree with you. Let me just remind everybody and welcome everyone here once again. This is our welcome back refresh, our fall season launch. Couldn't be happier to be with Lindrea Reynolds from her LR, right? LR.
Yeah, LR Brand Consulting.
She is a brand and personal and professional brand expert, although I think she's sounding to me this morning like a wonderfully welcome life coach as well. So thank you for being with us. When is it a good time to start thinking about a brand? And do I need somebody to talk to about it? Because I will say this, I don't know if many of you know Carla Harris. She's really well known. Carla is a great friend to Generation W. And she did talk about this professional brand experience. And she went to her boss and said, what do I need to do to move ahead at her company? And they said, well, you know, people want to see you as X. You need to do more of X. And so what she did was everywhere she went, she said, well, I am doing X, or did you hear about the X I did? In order for people to really help, she was elevating that aspect of, I guess, upward mobility they were requiring her in her brand so people would recognize that she had it. So that was an intentional, professional strategy as it related to her brand, I guess, growth.
Yeah, yeah. I think that when you start this journey, I've spoken to teenagers.
Uh-huh.
I've spoken to teenagers who were trying to figure out how to talk about themselves for a college essay.
Right.
Are, you know, who want to just kind of identify the core of who they are and what they believe. And so that type of work of at least starting with understanding a little bit of who you are, because we evolve. It's not going to, it's continuous work. We as humans, we evolve. So you're gonna have a personal brand no matter at what stage you are in your life, because it's how people perceive you.
So let me ask you, it's okay, if a brand is defined, which we do know, a brand is how people define you, right?
I think it's how people, I don't think it's how people define you. I think it's how people, it's how people see you. And I believe it's how you see yourself as well. So I think that's the difference in how I do it, because I want people.
How often, though, do they not align? How aware are we, based in your work in general, of the brand we think we are and the brand that people perceive us to be?
Oh, you know, I don't have a percentage, but I would say in my work, it depends on the season that people are in. That's what I've learned. I have had people who, because of personal things going on in their lives, their behavior or interactions towards people or situations, it wasn't necessarily reflective of who they are and what they believed. It was because of what they were dealing with or what they were going through. And so I think sometimes situations in our lives, sometimes it can sometimes dim that light. And we're not illuminating the world with our good as best as we would love to because of certain aspects or situations that are going on. So I think it just kind of depends on where you are in life. And so some of that work to kind of stay true to yourself, it is having those influencers and insulators. It's having people to remind you. Is if you have the means to do professional, if it means going to therapy and having someone to also remind you of who you are and help affirm you. And so that helps us to continue to not stay in certain places and also continue to elevate in the spaces that we were designed to elevate in. And so I think to answer your question, it depends on the stage that you're in. And some other aspect, if it's not related to personal life, it could be that you have yet to really discover or been put in a situation where you have been able to activate that superpower. It may be just kind of brewing, and you haven't been in a space where you can actually do the work. And so executive coaching, there's so many ways to just kind of figure out how to identify what that looks like. But to answer your question, Donna, throughout life, it may not align depending on your life situation. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. I want to say hello to Amanda Nimnick. I've been trying to find you too. Let's connect. And every session we always ask our guests to give us 3 things they'd like us to think on moving forward, right? I think we should probably take these, Sherry, and put them in like a little book moving forward, maybe a digital book. So let's take a look at, yes, ignite transformative brand actions. All right, that sounds very official. Tell us exactly what that means to you.
Ignite transformative brand
Yeah,
action.
yeah.
What it means to me is that it goes back to what we talked about in terms of brand behavior. How do we make sure we're igniting brand behavior? Sometimes in personal branding, we can get stuck on a beautiful headshot. We can get stuck on a video, or if we had several speaking opportunity. But what lives are being changed in the process? Is it your life and the people you're affecting? And so it's about what behavior change comes out of the story that we're putting out into the world. And so here are a few things that I think can ignite some of that transformative brand actions and brand behavior change. People behavior change. I would say significance is greater than success. I'm a firm believer that going back to that big, audacious, noble goal, and also thinking about how do you want to impact the world in a better, in a greater way. I've had clients where we've kind of worked through some of their values, and they would get kind of stuck on the surface part. They're like, I value wealth. I value, they were just
Oh,
stuck.
that's not a bad thing, is it?
No,
Okay.
it's not a bad thing. I too value wealth. But we wanted to kind of do the deeper work of saying, how do we get there, right?
Right.
How do we get to wealth? And what does that look like for the people that you want to serve,
Right.
And
Uh-huh.
so what is the significance of the work that you're doing? I think also the thing too is sometimes we look at numbers in society right now, especially in culture with social media, we'll equate success to the number of likes and comments that we have. Just if we've made millions of dollars, there are people who are millionaires who are unhappy. There are people who have likes and comments who are depressed, but how do you identify the significant impact you want to have? Is it, I want to make sure that I'm touching this person's life, and then I see them actually go off to school. I see them become this incredible mother. How do we measure what significance looks like versus these sort of sometimes vanity impact numbers, So it really is about creating this type of domino effect so that you're able to make sure people are able to thrive and be great. And so I always say what is significant about the work that you're doing and how it's going to have global impact for the future. In
Right.
terms of,
Go ahead.
okay, personal branding is about holistic perception. And we talked a little bit about this, Donna. It is the inside out approach. It's how you see yourself, even before others even see you. You have to know the narrative that you want to put out, and if that narrative is true to you, because then you will have, I call it a comparison syndrome. You be confused. You may take on opportunities and jobs that were not meant for you, because you're not quite sure of who you are before you actually go out and pursue certain opportunities and everything. And so it really is about understanding what your values are, understanding what your goals are personally and professionally, and knowing that even if you make a mistake and someone believes that you aren't good at what you do, you're not the best at doing this type of work. What do you believe about yourself, and how do you show up differently next time? And is that your audience? So how do you see yourself before you think about how people actually see you? And that's how you stay grounded and you can stay good in this type of work. Yeah.
And does that cover your last one as well?
Yep. It popped off the screen. So I think it was being true to your needs. Your
Yes,
needs.
absolutely.
Yep. Your needs. That goes back to that comparison, and what do you need in order for you to show up effectively and holistically in this world. I think that too often, I talked a little bit about seasons, but Ecclesiastes talks about seasons. There's a season to grow. There's a season to harvest. And so we have to be true to our own needs and know that if we're in a season of where we're growing, it's okay that we may not be harvesting right now. You know, if we're in a season of healing, it's okay to be in that season. And so really being true to your own needs when you're doing this type of work, because again, we'll get caught up and other people's beliefs for us, and also how the world says we need to show up, even if it's not healthy for us. I always tell clients to eat your pie. And
I saw that. What does that mean?
eat your pie. And so pie stands for P is preservation. How do you preserve yourself in the midst of your journey in this life? Is it your health, your well-being, your community? I is your identity, and the work that we're talking about in terms of your values and your mission and who you are. And elevation is just kind of bringing those things together and ensuring that you're able to talk about it effectively. You're able to show up authentically because you know who you are, because you're also taking care of yourself. And it's a pie because it just goes back. You can't have a slice. You can't have one without the other. You can't, you need to preserve yourself and take care of yourself. Your health is your wealth in order to continue to know who you are. You need to communicate. So it's a cycle. It's really a cycle. And I call it a pie because you need the whole thing. You really need to eat it and have the whole thing. And so, but yeah, those are kind of my big three.
No, they're very powerful. They're very powerful, and we're really grateful that you could. If you'd like to leave us with a kind of closing thing about storytelling, I know that you really focus on telling good stories, helping people amplify their stories. Could you give us an insight or two on something we can take away about the powerfulness of storytelling and how we can impact our own?
Yeah, I think the powerfulness of storytelling is the word that comes to mind is listening. I think in the world that we're in, everything is microwaved. Everything happens so fast. It's so instant. Many of us, we need instant gratification. We need to be affirmed. We're looking for the next, and we have to sometimes be in a quiet space and just listen. Listen to our inner voice. And whatever that inner voice is for you. For me, the inner voice is the Holy Spirit. What is God telling me in this moment about myself, about my next, and what I should do in this moment? And I document it and I'm writing it down, and it becomes a part of my story. I think that listening to the world around us and not taking in everything, but just listening in a way with curiosity. I think so many of us it's hard to practice curiosity because we're so polarized in so many ways. And so a part of good storytelling is listening to ourselves, our inner selves, our journeys, documenting it, and practicing curiosity with others so that we can be true even about their stories. We're not assuming that they're this way. That's seeing people's value below the surface. It's being curious about them and not judging, but without knowing. And so, or even after knowing. And so, practicing curiosity and listening to yourself and others.
Well, I have to just say, as you've been talking, as we have been talking, I've been writing things down, and the things that really stood out, and so much of it did, and a lot of it is in this chat. Olenda's going to leave us with, I love that somehow in listening to Lindrea, impacting the world does not seem impossible. It seems doable. Wow, that's powerful. Our calling is bigger than what we can conceive. Totally true. I've learned about influencers and insulators. I love that. I've learned about that. We need to think about how we show up. We all love that your parents saw the value below the surface, and it's incumbent upon all of us to find the value in the people around us that they might not necessarily show us, and then help them show up with that, right? And that your health is your wealth. Really enjoyed that as well. Lindrea, I'm so glad that you reached out. I'm glad our paths crossed. I know they will continue to cross. On behalf of all of us at Generation W, I want to thank you, and I want to remind everybody that we're back. And our next refresh is on September 25th. It's called Blazing Trails. I'm going to say having the courage to fight fire. I don't know if everyone's aware, but I'm sure there are jobs, there's things you think that are insurmountable. There are opportunities that are people, most of the, they could be male dominated, that you don't step into. Where do people, women in particular, find the courage to step into places that they don't seem to be welcomed, or they not many people that look like them? So you will meet on September 25th. This amazing Chantal Botting, she's a deputy fire chief of Fort Lauderdale Fire Rescue. She said that becoming a firefighter was a career calling and the most fulfilling thing she can do. Just 4% of professional firefighters are women, right? We want to definitely hear their story. We want to praise them. We want to encourage them. We also want to find out where that courage comes from. And so join us for that wonderful discussion and learning from Chantal Botting on September 25th. Please do follow us at Generation W, all of our social. We have some mentor opportunities in Orlando and Jacksonville with our young girls. And I think we heard Lindrea say, paying it forward with our young women is something that really is important to them, and it's important to us. If you do, reach out to info@genwow.com. Yes, genwow.com. That's it. Okay, everyone. Have a great day. Let's all remember and be thankful. God bless.